Boy, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building.
Your life is going to be pure hell every minute that you're here.
You'll never take back our country with weakness.
The 6th of January 2021. A day that shook the foundations of American democracy. Where hundreds stormed the seat of government.
This nation was founded on revolutionary activity.
To try to overturn an election result.
Riot police are now finally pushing people off the grounds and away from the Capitol building.
We'll be back when they're hanging them from gallows up there. How about that?
But this assault didn't come out of the blue.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now and demand an end to this siege.
It was by people who felt they were carrying out the wishes of the sitting US president. Wishes they felt he signaled to them loud and clear. This is the story of one of the most tumultuous weeks in living memory in Washington, a city that had already started to feel like one dreading the next move of a cornered Donald Trump. As he returned from his Christmas break, it was becoming clear that any avenues he thought he had to cling to power were closing. And things got worse for the president. He was caught pressuring an official to somehow recalculate the votes in a state he lost in the November election. Republican candidates lost 2 Senate races in Georgia, so his party lost control of the Senate. But Wednesday, the 6th of January, was always going to be the day it came to a head.
Madam Speaker, members of Congress.
Congress was due to do what's normally just procedural, formalize the results of the election, against the futile demands of Donald Trump, who'd stationed his forces outside. Fight for Trump. At the request of the president, thousands of his supporters had gathered from all over the country.
Well, we hope people see that things aren't right with the election system the way it is today.
Violence happens, like it happens, but we're not going to start it. You know, we're just like here to defend ourselves.
The spark was lit by the president himself in his midday address to the crowd, when he called the outcome of the election an egregious assault on U.S. democracy.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
It was all his supporters needed to hear. Even before his 70-minute speech finished, they started to march up to Capitol Hill, where that session to confirm the election result was in progress. Soon, what looked like the entire crowd was heading that way. There were some attacks on journalists, another consequence of the rallying cries of the president. Within 20 minutes of the end of his speech, Donald Trump's supporters were surrounding the Capitol building. Handfuls of officers tried to fend them off as best they could, but they were overwhelmingly outnumbered. Clashes went on, but protesters were now breaching cordons all around the grounds, climbing platforms that had been set up for Joe Biden's inauguration exactly 2 weeks later. And then, in barely believable scenes, they started scaling the walls of this historic seat of American legislative power. It didn't stop there. With little to stop them, the crowd became intent on storming the building. Within a matter of minutes from the initial breach, scores of people were inside, and it would eventually become hundreds that made their way to the doors of the chamber where the session had been abruptly halted. Many politicians had been rushed to safety. Others took cover where they were.
I've never had a panic attack, but I think that's what I was having. My heart was pounding very, very hard. I was having a little bit of trouble catching my breath, and I felt almost paralyzed.
In the melee outside the chamber, a single shot was fired by police. One protester, 35-year-old Ashley Babbitt, dropped to the ground and died. In another part of the building, U.S. Capitol Police officer Brian Sicknick was violently confronted by protesters and later died of his injuries. Both of the dead, on opposite sides of this battle in the heart of Washington, had been military veterans. With the assault still underway, the president-elect couldn't hide his disgust and dismay.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now and demand an end to this siege.
But inside and outside the U.S. Capitol, protesters were now giddy with excitement and in jubilant mood. Ryan Selesky from Virginia had been one of the first to get in. I met him as he emerged from the building.
But then I realized, I was like, if we overwhelm them, we can push through, because we just wanted to be inside. So we made it up the stairs. We started knocking on, individual doors, hoping that somebody would come out. Then we made our way to the chamber.
That is just not how things are done in this country. Right. Lawlessness, storming buildings even, and that's what's happened today.
This nation wasn't founded on civility. This nation was founded on revolutionary activity. We became civil after the government realized that they got overwhelmed.
So what happens now?
I guess now we wait and see if they take us seriously, because they saw how easily we were able to breach their defense.
The president did speak, but still couldn't help repeating his claims of vote rigging.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special.
Some of those special to the president are now being arrested for violent entry, remaining in restricted areas, and theft of public property. And these infamous images will live long in the memory. The Capitol building was eventually secured, and only in the evening the area around it was too.
Well, after hours of allowing protesters to remain on Capitol grounds with a curfew now in place, riot police are now finally pushing people off the grounds and away from the Capitol building.
While there were some scuffles, many point to the relative restraint shown by security forces as compared to some of the scenes we saw at Black Lives Matter protests last summer.
We'll be back when they're hanging them from gallows up there.
And the demonstrators here felt their actions had somehow been heroic.
All over the world is looking at Washington now. They saw people storming the Capitol.
I hope they keep watching it. We are the last hope for the world. At least in my mind and everything I've seen, we are free.
But what was it all for? Because into the night, with parts of the Capitol still laying in disarray, the session to confirm the election results defiantly resumed, with strong words from all sides.
To those who wreaked havoc in our Capitol today, you did not win. Violence never wins.
This president bears a great deal of the blame. This mob was in good part President Trump's doing.
Of the House of Representatives object to the counting of the electoral votes.
Senior Republicans may show their disgust now, but for weeks they didn't acknowledge Joe Biden's election win either. And even though nearly 150 Republicans still objected, in the early hours Joe Biden was confirmed the election winner. Through an aide, Donald Trump tweeted, "Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless there will be an orderly transition on January 20th. Given the scenes in the Capitol building that the US was waking up to, that statement was the bare minimum he could have done and did not show the humility it needed to for someone who instigated all this. That was certainly the message of Joe Biden.
The past 4 years, we've had a president who's made his contempt for our democracy, our Constitution, the rule of law, clear in everything he has done. And yesterday was but the culmination of that unrelenting attack.
In spite of nighttime curfews, life was starting to return to normal in Washington. but many Americans described feeling numb at the events of the previous day. David Hartful Jr. works at the Capitol building and lives close by.
It was scary, and when I got up this morning, I was like, maybe I should just stay inside all day. I really had that thought of, am I going to be just attacked for just going and paying bills? Like, that's a scary thought to wake up with in the morning.
But many of those who'd been involved in the unrest could be found sightseeing in their capital city.
Yesterday had to happen.
Here, there were no regrets and no remorse.
How do you feel about it all?
I feel very privileged that I was a part of yesterday. I fight for freedom and democracy.
Even with everything that happened?
Yes, even with everything that happened.
We had the greatest president in our lifetime doing everything he could do, sacrificing his golden years to make this country what it should be and what it always has been. He sacrificed so much, and that's why you've seen so many people here. They realize that.
I'm holding the line.
Rick Sarmiento from Florida, who'd been part of it all, is one of many who, on reflection, feels this is just the beginning of a movement, not the end.
I firmly believe this is our 1776. I firmly believe this country, two things were going to happen. Either another revolution or a civil war.
Well, in spite of everything we saw with our own eyes, a lot of those protesters who laid siege to the US Capitol insist that it is the other side that is trying to seize power and subvert democracy. Among them, there's very little sense of embarrassment at the events here, if anything, a sense of pride.
Good is a way to describe it.
Democrats are adamant Donald Trump needs to leave office immediately.
The President of the United States incited an armed insurrection against America. The gleeful desecration of the U.S. Capitol, which is the temple of our American democracy, and the violence targeting Congress are horrors that will forever stain our nation's history.
My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote.
And it took deaths and unprecedented condemnation of his actions for this, the most basic requisite of his position.
My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation.
But whatever he does now, Donald Trump will forever be that US president who inspired his supporters to storm his country's own seat of democracy.